Good afternoon, fellow citizens. Welcome back to the Citizens Chat Show. My name is Masesa, Demiano, your show host of this conversation every Friday, 2 to 4 p.m. Today, and just like any other day, we have topical issues that we engage. We bring to you viewers to listen through and learn on the issues that are happening around the country, the region. And just like that, we have of course, the insecurities that are happening in Congo. So we need to have a conversation on the insecurity in Congo, but also whether the heads of state meeting in Nairobi will offer a lasting solution to the conflicts that are happening there. And joined on the panel to discuss this and much more, I am joined by the East African, our elder Mwambutsya and Ndebesa. He's of course, the East African, I would want to say that. You're welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
And of course, the maiden appearance onto the Citizens Chat Show and this the chat show itself, Sarah Kagingo. She's a media personality. She's a journalist, a media personality, the proprietor of Soft Power News. Sarah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Demian.
And of course, most times she prefers being associated with Congo more. So this is a conversation that is dear to her. Sarah, you're welcome. And finally, we have Ndugu Ochieno Joseph. He's an ideologue with the UPC, but also a media personality. Joseph, you're welcome.
And an African.
And an African. Your outfit today really is a statement.
Fantastic. Welcome to Sarah Beery.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You don't have to market yourself as an African.
So into the conversation, we've had these weeks have been quite eventful in the region, but importantly also for Uganda. We've had the strikes with the teachers coming off the budget speech and the president's pronouncements. Then also we see at the neighborhood we had Chogan, which is ongoing. So I need to just bring us to speed, especially with Prof, who is a university lecturer, who is an academia, to just take us through what it means for the government to come out and make the pronouncement of saying the arts, the sciences should be favored more than the arts in this state of the economy today.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. You've just made a statement about the scientists being paid better than the arts. I am not sure whether that is a policy because there is no policy. Does it mean that scientists, say in agriculture, in the Revenue Authority, in the National Water and Sewerage Corporation, in the Ministry of Energy, in the Ministry of Defense, Internal Affairs, and elsewhere are equally going to be paid that increment? Because if you simply use the omnibus term, scientists, are we saying even a scientist in primary is also going to be paid? Or what? How are we categorizing those scientists? That is because there is a lack of a policy, which policy would have defined what you even mean as a scientist. Because even a social scientist could say, I'm a scientist. So who is that scientist that is going to earn more? But besides that, I think there is a need for harmonization of salary pay and salary increments. There needs to be a policy framework, a legal framework, and an institutional framework. In an institutional framework, for example, a salary board or a salary commission that should look into these things and do them systematically. You know, Joseph is here and is going to maybe talk about UPC. In 1969 or thereabout or 70, during the move to the left strategy, I think UPC had come up with a suggestion to have unification of pay scales. You have to do it systematically, informed by a certain policy framework. Because now you see the confusion. I might be a teacher who has got a Bachelor of Science, but I'm teaching in the primary, so I am not going to earn. Or I'm a UPDF officer who is an engineer, I'm working in defense. Am I also part of that one? And then you find that that brings confusion. The issue behind, I think, salary enhancement of scientists was to motivate them, possibly to teach better. I don't know, because it's not necessary to do research. But I don't think that would have been, that is the way to go. If there was thought given to it under policy framework, policy process, I don't think that it would have come to where it has come. There should have been a systematic way even of paying those scientists in a manner that does not arouse the interests of the other public servants. It could have come, say, in form of allowances for, research or laboratory equipment and things like that. But in form of salary, once it is a salary, then it should be harmonized. I think everybody should be paid the same. This morning, I sent something on Facebook to say, for example, in terms of weight that a subject carries, English language in Uganda at O level carries more weight. Because if you don't pass English language, you don't get first grade. Whereas when you fail biology or chemistry or agriculture, you can still get your first grade if you perform well in the other ones. Number two is that you find almost every day English language is taught. These other subjects do not have the same hours of teaching as English language. So how do you pay somebody of chemistry much, much more? And they have increased these salaries by almost 400%. And you leave the other one who is teaching another subject below. It will bring some confusion. Now, what will happen is that most public servants are going now also to ask salary increase at the same rate. Local government, I think, has already put government to notice. Because there are very many people working in government, including scientists, natural scientists, if you want. There are very many people who are going to question the basis of this increment. And at the end of the day, you'll find that even the scientists who are meant to be motivated may not be motivated. Because if you are in a school where there are constant strikes and some teachers are demotivated, even those of arts, you will not also have the motivation also to teach as you were expected to teach. So there are very many dimensions to this hyped salary increase at a very short notice, which should have been thought through, but it could not be thought through unless, and the people, the citizens have always, the parliament have always asked the government to put there a salary board or committee, whatever you want to call it, which would be tasked. Actually, even the government or the president would now be pushing all these salary claims to that board. They say, I am waiting for the board, I've given it to the board, it is working on something, and it is going to come up. But for the president to own it alone, and everybody is looking at the president, and everybody is now, because there are very many people who also want their salary enhancement, even scientists themselves who are going to raise this issue, then you leave the whole primary section as if it is not important. I think there is a fundamental problem, a fundamental flaw with this proclamation, I think, because I don't think it was a policy, because normally policies come up through a research and a process where there are many views, and normally, by the way, these policy proposals are finally they are finally coordinated through one office, I think, cabinet secretariat. And one of the regulations requirement for policy to come up as policy is to have policy alternatives and to engage the stakeholders or people concerned. All this has not been done. Therefore, my conclusion would be that I don't know how they are going to do it. It should come back to that issue, that let it come out as a policy, but this policy should be also backed up by a legal framework, and there should be an institutional framework, which is the salary review board or committee by whatever name, which will look at all dimensions and then recommend to government what to do next. Otherwise, public service is going to go into a crisis.
Interesting, Prof. There. I just want to bring on Sarah. He's talking about policy and the need to have a standard procedure for which to have these increments made. Isn't it the time when, at this point, we need to start now the conversation on the wage payment scheme, and also possibly agree on the minimum wage that should be given across all board, so that then we avoid this kind of segregation in payments.
Differential and preferential treatment.
Of
I don't know to who.
course, His Excellency, the President, has always said that if we set a minimum wage, then, I mean, you'll have, because unemployment is still high. We have so many young people unemployed. So if you set the minimum wage, then, I mean, someone else will then employ the others. They will still find a way of working or even go underground. But given what's happening now, the rising commodity prices, low-income earners having no relief whatsoever, and from the perspective of the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda, we suggest that because government has recapitalized UDB, that is for the big companies. There is a recovery fund for MSMEs, and you can get up to 100 million shillings, not more than 10% interest rate from Equity Bank and Post Bank and you have a grace period of 1 year. In this budget, you see that they are going to pay arrears, which is a good thing. Many companies have suffered for several years with arrears, but there is nothing to give some breathing room to low-income earners, and which is why there is a big discussion among the business community that the threshold for pay as you earn, is raised from 235,000 shillings to 400,000 shillings. So of course I agree. While I appreciate the President's background that scientists can resolve societal issues, they can innovate, say, a COVID vaccine and all these things, applications, take to solutions from first principles, our own homemade solutions. But you see already how the country is not agreed. So it's important to listen to everybody with concerns. But also, I agree with Professor on harmonization of salaries. You find an ED executive director earning 45 million shillings and another technocrat in a ministry earning 1.5 million shillings. So there is need to harmonize. We need to move to that direction. A policy, a board, a commission to handle those issues and resolve them.
Interesting. Joseph, do you think probably it is the right way for government to suggest that, okay, we could have really scientists be given, because the appreciation of scientists came almost after COVID and what happened around COVID, and now the President realized the need, even when the doctors and all these teachers used to strike so much. I think the realization of their increments started right after, I think, COVID. Do you think it is the right way to move to empower that section of the workers?
Of course not. Mr. Museveni speaks on the hook, the way he feels and how he's woken up in the morning. I wish after all this time Mr. Museveni would review, and social media has helped, thanks to scientists, yes, that he could review some of the videos of himself speaking 30 years ago, himself 35 years ago, or some of the interviews in which he's been captured in the last several years. Those themselves could actually help him review his own thinking and therefore strategy. No, I think the mess in our system is a question of leadership, and whether leadership is a scientific thing or not, I don't know. No, we're going to be discussing Congo. The most important person, excuse me, on the globe is guiding global polity and economics is a politician, is a president, and would normally be a president of America. In this case, these days, president of, or indeed the prime minister, or president of China. So these are political issues, and so you begin to ask, so who's the driver of the state of the Republic of Uganda? Do we need to have a president who's a scientist in order for us to reindustrialize? And Mr. Museveni needs to think like that. No, it's an absolute commonsensical thing. What normally happens in nation states and sensible nation states, and in the likely event that I'm president of UPC, I will deliberately actually table a very specific policy provision. I'm already working on this to build on some of the things that Professor is talking about. These are matters that, and Museveni is an old man who's tired, who should be now advising and guiding. He shouldn't be getting into some of these nitty-gritty things. These are things for young economists and strategists like Sarah to help think and then broad. But you know where they go? These are things that go to public service. The last UPC government had a Minister for Public Service and Cabinet Affairs, Mr. Wilson Okwenji, who apparently, Okwenji is the man who gave Museveni a job in President's office, and very, very now decent retired man. So Minister for Public Service should really work with whoever is linked to labor, to Minister of Labor, to consider the state of the national economy, the state of workers, and so therefore work towards what I propose to be a national council for the evaluation of pay, and make sure that we do some kind of pay grading. And pay grading should actually go from the lowest, what is the junior official in a ministry, a public servant. How much do they earn? What weighting do you give them? What are their equivalents to teachers and or nurses? And what are their equivalents to somebody, say, for instance, who did military training and did not conclude, and so therefore has this pocket of qualifications? What do you give them? And in the likely event that they went in, that they became merely army driver, but not soldiers, where do you give them? How much do they earn in terms of pointing? Something along those lines, that's what you do. That's away from the private sector. So generally you do that as a public sector pay scale, public sector pay review. That public sector pay scale and pay review, in my opinion, should include all public workers, and my opinion, should also include politicians, including legislators. One of the reasons maybe why Museveni is stumbling on these things is that this is against the backdrop of legislators being bribed, or whatever the case, with 40 million Uganda shillings. Some of those legislators don't have A levels. That you know it is. Some of them don't. They have equivalent A level so-called equivalents, and some of them just about sneaked to go into the National Assembly. Most of these guys are fantastic friends of mine, very good working, hard-working people, but those are Ugandan citizens. How do you justify just throwing 40 million shillings to an individual? And then you say that a hard-working average arts teacher, and Professor makes a fantastic point about English, and indeed English and maths, which maths is a science subject. But that's a very important point, that you need to pass English. And are you going to give special monies to arts teachers or not? What normally would happen in schools and institutions would be you beef people's salaries with extra work that they do, either the departmental heads or possibly some of the extra works that they do in terms of research with the science and otherwise. But granted, teachers should be paid equivalent amount of money. Further observation I want to make on this as a contribution is this, that normally what happens in sensible nation states around the world, you would actually give what they call, you would possibly give Kampala weighting, meaning it's a capital city. You could say when a teacher works in Kampala, you give them an extra 2,000 or 3,000 pounds, maybe 10,000 shillings extra because of the living cost of living. Yes. And then you maybe grade Kampala, maybe you get Gulu and Mbarara and Jinja at the next tier, and then the lowest tier are the smaller districts, the rural spaces. But that having been said, you also do extra grading, meaning hard to reach areas. And then you begin to say Nabanja Primary School, that rural primary school in Tororo, where almost hardly anybody want to go. That is where you could argue for pay differentials. And they simply say that, well, if Napak is struggling with recruiting teachers, or Isingiro is struggling with recruiting teachers, those are hard to reach areas, you'll get an extra 50,000 shillings.
But that would also motivate these teachers to
Precisely,
go
but that's
to
how
these places.
That's how you sensibly do it.
Yes.
Now, final point actually then on the question of private sector. I don't know whether Sarah who raised it. The CEOs of private industry becomes a slightly different issue because these guys would go ahead and say that, well, that is a matter for industry. So you cannot compel Stanbic to pay a certain amount of money to their CEOs. Stanbic is a non-Ugandan organization, or an Ugandan organization. It's a private company. But for sensible governments, and if it was a UPC government, we would actually still put an element of a ceiling, because we are big on government. Put a ceiling on that. But if you don't put a ceiling on that, you do that through taxation. You say that when you earn of a certain amount of money, you pay so much tax. And Sarah is actually right. The tax threshold at the lower bit should really by and large go up to about, in fact, for me, I was generally thinking about 500,000 shillings, unless it's a particular group of rural workers. And
Yeah,
that really how
I
you
think
do
there
it.
is, of course, we do pay as you earn. Pay as you earn is, of course, is dependent on how much you earn. Percentage is
Indeed, and it's part of an element of progressive tax.
yeah, true. And
But Professor Sorry was rightly raising concerns about the tax collection body called
the URA.
the URA, whether or not they're actually effectively doing this. Those would be the things. But do you remember why I'm extending this? If those things were done properly, Mr. Museveni would not necessarily need to be involved. You know?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Prof, I don't know who, either of you who has the opportunity to have a take on CHOGM and what happened in Rwanda, the CHOGM. And,
but before CHOGM,
yes.
I wanted to make a conclusion on that one,
Okay.
especially on the rationale.
Can you also give your thoughts
on the rationale that society has been transformed by science, which is true, but equally by humanities. If you look at the modern society and its transformation, it was as much as a result of the Industrial Revolution, which was mainly scientists, as much as also the Age of Enlightenment. If there was no Age of Enlightenment in Europe, even science would not have achieved what they achieved. If they remained burdened by issues of theology, that you can't do this, you can't do this, which were lifted off. That lead was lifted off by the philosophers and the humanities and all that. Actually, Socrates, that is very far. Even at that time of Industrial Revolution and the Age of Enlightenment. So both of them combined in order to come up with this modern civilization. So really, the debate should not actually be that. But even if it was that, then how come that you are paying secondary, you are increasing secondary education, secondary teachers' salaries, but not primary? Because primary is the foundation of even that science we are talking about. So there is a disparity between paying secondary and leaving out primary on one hand, and on the other, paying scientists in education and health, but not paying scientists in other departments who are equally doing the same work. Coming to CHOGM. Well, CHOGM is a club that has been there for quite some time, I think since independence, especially when the Africans got independence, but maybe before that. And it is an attempt at solidarity, shared humanity. These are former dependencies. It is controversial because these are former, most of the countries are former dependencies of UK. But in terms of tangible results, you may not see much out of CHOGM meetings and actually the whole Commonwealth. But in terms of non-tangible issues, I think they have got a contribution. Of course, we cannot say that they will contribute to everything, but they have got a contribution. I think they have set standards for good governance, for example, and they continue talking together with other organizations. In the past, actually, and I think even now, not necessarily the Commonwealth Secretariat, but Commonwealth countries normally have got exchange programs. I think there are very many students who get scholarships through the Commonwealth. There is British Commonwealth, Indian Commonwealth, Canadian Commonwealth, Australian Commonwealth scholarships. And I think these ones go towards also ameliorating some of the challenges of the world. Of course, there are glaring weaknesses in it, but there it is. It is not merely a talking club, but even talking and having different people who were former dependencies of UK meet once in a while also and exchange ideas and maybe put pressure on their friends, although they have no enforcement mechanism, has maybe made a contributions towards issues of good governance, maybe democracy. Of course, controversial as it is at times, the Commonwealth, whenever it goes to observe elections, it normally authenticates dictatorship. Like in the past when they said that Uganda's elections were free and fair in the circumstances in 1980, that was legitimization. And they have gone ahead also to call upon some leaders in their club to behave. They are now even bringing in the non-former colonies of Britain. Rwanda is not. Mozambique is not. I think they are going to admit Togo and some other West African country. So many countries need to come together so that we are living under globalization. Globalization which has been mainly out of technology and communication. And we equally need certain civilizing organizations that are not necessarily technology that can prevail upon people, so that we have got universalism, we have got universal citizenship. We don't cocoon ourselves only in our countries at a time when we are undergoing globalization. So it is one of those globalizing institutions setting standards, global norms, where, but of course there are glaring weaknesses, as I have pointed out, in the organization. After all, it doesn't have enforcement mechanism for what standards it sets. But it's very important that once in a while, people have got global organizations to match with globalization of technology and communication.
Interesting. I know Ochieno would want to submit on that, but my interest would want to ask whether this program has really a push to honor the extremes of member states, especially the aggression onto the other countries, and what they say about some of these, because this happens at a time when the East African the community is already in high tensions of insurgencies. But I don't know whether some of these communications will come out clearly.
And that's my point.
Quickly, yes. Commonwealth has no enforcement mechanism. So for them, it is a declaration. They issue declarations for people to voluntarily observe them and do the needful. But if you don't, there is no enforcement mechanism. You can even withdraw from the Commonwealth. I think Zimbabwe is not. But as I said, they are making some contribution, but they cannot be held accountable for creating enforcement mechanism for the whole world, even when the UN, which is a member organization of almost all states, has also failed. How much more the Commonwealth can fail. However, I want to repeat it, that there are some incidental benefits that accrue from the Commonwealth. The fact that a member can be put on pressure by a letter or statements that you are not following the standards, the standard norms of governance or democracy or law, because there is the Commonwealth law. Actually, the lawyers in the Commonwealth exchange ideas, they exchange cases, and so that it strengthens the legal processes in their respective countries, and they use Commonwealth law or something like that. Those make some few contributions, weaknesses notwithstanding. But he wanted to talk about the weaknesses.
No, they are as contradictory and as hypocritical as many of these organizations come. One slight benefit, yes, member states that were former colonies of Britain come together and sit over a cup of tea. We share English language, and then through the British Council and did Commonwealth scholarships, have conversations. One benefit for me, had it not been the membership of the Commonwealth, Museveni and others would have possibly tied me up in Makerere. Once I escaped from prison, I was lucky. I had my Ugandan passport. I had traveled to Nairobi as deputy head of student delegation the year before. So I managed to get a passport somehow. And then, of course, I was able to have some money. So when I escaped, I didn't need a visa to go to Britain. So I managed to escape between Kampala and Entebbe and onto the plane. And so that is a credit, that's an official one. So, but you know, that door and that window was closed within 3, 4, 5 years. Why? The British started saying that, oh, many blacks, when this immigration thing started going. And I'm saying so again very deliberately. So that we are swamping Britain. This thing's leading to Brexit. Number one. Number two, British Commonwealth does not treat Ugandan Commonwealth citizens the same way they treat white Australia, white New Zealand, and white Canada. Just think about it. But that having been said, fair enough. The Harare Declaration of 1992 on good governance was a hopeful thing for those of us who were then campaigning around multipartyism in Africa, Nigeria at the time, including Uganda. And we thought that maybe that would be a time for the British to put pressure on Mr. Museveni and say, open up to political space. They did not. You know, the interesting thing is that Zimbabwe was pushed. In fact, they used sufficient pressure on Zimbabwe simply because, in my opinion, of the interest of white interest in settler Britain, Zimbabwe at the time. In fact, by the time Zimbabwe pulled out, the poor country had been wrapped up under sanction, and the youth Commonwealth power to suppress Zimbabwe. And it was not about Mugabe, but white colonial power wanting to pull off from Zimbabwe. And that is official, but it's a conversation we can have another day. Number two, fast forward from that, the Commonwealth Conference, which was held in Uganda, Uganda was given as the next destination for the Commonwealth when Uganda had not yet opened up to multipartyism. So what hypocrisy. Point number three, today Rwanda is hosting. Rwanda is not a former colony of Britain. Rwanda and Mozambique were pulled in to really mobilize for British political and economic interests. And for us as Africans, we need to know that we're being used as this. Is it a good thing to come together? Absolutely fine. But generally, at the back of it, Anglo-America and their interests are pushing to expand on this. Not surprising that Rwanda is now a quiet member of the Commonwealth. But now, Congo is complaining that Rwanda is a bit pinching it at the border, as we're going to discuss DRC. What do the British say about Rwanda's involvement in Congo? Now, for me as an African, that's what concerns me.
Interesting. Possibly. So, Sarah, do you want to have a take on this?
On D.R Congo.
Chogam itself. And for me, because what I'm seeing here is that it's more of that moment where possibly the royals in the British would want to come and tour around their colonies, former colonies, and really have a time out for adventure and maybe have these people catch up. Because I don't see, maybe even for the host countries to really benefit.
But are you talking about Chogam Onre or the Commonwealth in general? Because Chogam is just a meeting.
Yes, that's a meeting.
But it's the most representative because it's the heads. Yes.
That's when you really feel the presence of these countries coming together. But maybe we need to go out of that case. Sarah, let's start with you. Since you've not had time to that, let's go to Congo, where possibly you have some interests, yeah.
More
you have
interest.
friends. you have friends there. You probably are the person who has been pushing so much for Uganda, Congo. You're one of the people who celebrated Congo joining the East African community for business-related reasons, at least that I know. I've been following your commentaries on Congo. You have friends there. You even speak some French and Congolese. So, interesting.
Yeah.
We know there has been insurgencies, especially in the eastern region of Congo, Kivu and Ituri provinces. And we would want to ask, it's over 2 decades now we've seen insecurities, and just recently, one would want to know what is the latest conflict on DRC about, and interestingly, where we are seeing the M23 from nowhere re-emerging. Yeah.
Now, one, we just returned from D.R Congo, a consortium of businesses, ranging from tourism, manufacturing, services, which is what I'm involved in. And we were very warmly welcomed in Kinshasa. And Uganda did not, and actually when we were still in Kinshasa, there were several protests. Uganda's name was never mentioned. Incidentally, we held several business-to-business summits, business-to-business meetings during the business summit in Kinshasa. We had participation at a very high level of the D.R Congo government, the Minister for Foreign Trade, for Tourism, for Industries, and you could see that they are eager to work with us. And we advanced mutually beneficial trade, joint ventures, partnerships, because trade, business, investment, especially that is by cross-border, should be two-way. And they welcomed us. They even offered incentives to Ugandan businessmen, said they would offer Ugandans tax holidays for those who chose to invest in Congo. Uganda Airlines now flies 5 times a week to Kinshasa. They're also exploring flights to Lubumbashi and Goma. So for us, that was a very good thing. Our second leg was in Goma. And while, of course, when you're in Uganda, sometimes you may think Congo is one big bush of controversy and all these wrong things. Goma is a beautiful city. The roads are very well done. Kinshasa is, you know, upbeat. They are working. They are very brilliant people. The population is educated. So it's a good thing that Uganda continues to advance stability in the region. And in fact, our country is constructing roads through Beni and through other border posts that connect to D.R Congo. And it's a good thing. It will further ease barriers to trade. It would link our people further, contribute to integration. Now, on matters security, I'm an African and I believe in African solutions to our problems. So it's a good thing that the conclave of the heads of state met and they have agreed, they have actually received the concept of operations for the East African Standby Force from the chiefs of defense forces of the East African community. They have received the status of forces, the rules of engagement, and went ahead to instruct that a force is deployed. Now, what does this mean to Uganda? Because you recall, and soft power has been covering these issues in the region for 5 years now. You recall that when His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta first said that he called for cessation of hostilities, then some of our media houses then speculated about Uganda. Or has Uganda been thrown out? Now, the truth is that Uganda is not a party to the conflict in Congo. And we saw this for ourselves. Nobody in government, when we visited, was saying we have any issues. In Goma, we were received by the governor of the province, very high level. There was great participation in the summit. But then, shortly after we left, you see some Congolese in Goma protesting, burning our flag, and which brings me to my final comment on that whenever we are discussing these issues, we must be cautious not to inflame the situation. We must be woke to the sensitivities. Because of propaganda on social media and some reckless statements by some politicians in the region, then this is, it sends very bad messages to say a Congolese or a Ugandan who is not as sophisticated as everyone else to see through and sieve these lies. Now, on one hand, you have the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the FARDC, their army, and Ugandan government and UPDF enjoying subsisting bilateral security agreements. I mean, Congo would never have invited us if they had issues. You see the population commending wherever UPDF has been. They have eliminated some of those negative forces, including the joint enemy, the terrorist ADF. You see Congolese returning to their villages. But then on one hand, because of misinformation, you see pockets of a protest in Goma. So for me, I welcome the mechanism by the East African community, chaired by His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, on deploying a regional force, because we have had MONUSCO for so many years in D.R Congo. They have a 17,000 strong force, but yet people continue to die. There are many conflicts. Militia groups are increasing. Then, as a citizen of the region who wishes to relate with other citizens of the East African community, I call upon all those militia to cease fire, just like the EAC heads of state have urged immediately. Cease hostilities, allow people to go back to their homes. We have so many refugees now in Bunagana. Uganda is a Pan-African country. We are very welcoming to our brothers and sisters, Africans running away from conflict. But really, this is not a good thing to continue to happen. Also, some citizens may wonder, why is UPDF deployed? Why do we go to other countries to do these things? We cannot live as an island. We cannot conduct any business or do anything amid bullets. So it's important that we are all invested in peace and security in the region. And for me, I welcome the mechanism by the heads of state of the East African community.
Interesting. Prof, I would want to bring you on this one. Why the sudden reemergence of them 23 after we've seen them over 10 years? They had silenced their guns, but from nowhere we have walked to the fact that they have taken over the areas, and Bunagana is no cross. Where do they come from?
Thank you. I think let's also first look at it from a broader perspective and historical perspective. Especially the question of the insecurity in the DRC Congo, especially Eastern Congo, in the recent past, because in the past, even the other areas of Congo were equally insecure. When we look at it from a broader historical perspective, is that our heads of state need to declare their conflict of interest, if I can put it that way. Like we talk about declaring conflict of interest these days, when you are even having board meetings of certain organizations, or when you are involved in a certain case, there are certain official transcripts and unofficial transcripts. And I think the countries within this region, especially Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and Congo, have got security concerns for their different countries. But in history, in the most recent history, about 30, 20 years, you remember there were a time where the suspicion, I think, from Congo comes from, is that Rwanda and Uganda supported rebels. I'm talking about Kabila, the father, the old man. They supported that outfit to go and overthrow Mobutu. That was done from this eastern region, Eastern Congo. And then subsequently again, there was I think an organization called RCD. Is it RCD? Yeah, I think something like that. Rally for Congolese Democracy, something like that. Which was a rebel group also that was aiming at overthrowing Kabila, you know, and which was also supported from this region, from Uganda and Rwanda. You remember that RCD even divided into two at a later time again. There was RCD Goma and RCD Kisangani. Uganda was with the Kisangani group, headed by Professor D.R Wamba, my teacher. He taught me at the University of Dar es Salaam. And then there was another one supported by Rwanda based in Goma. And at one time they again crashed in Kisangani. Those were rebel groups which were aiming at toppling the Kinshasa regime. And actually it involved many countries. They call it the Third World War, the Third African World War, something like that, which involved Angola, Zimbabwe, I don't know who, because of that. So there is a suspicion in Congo which might arise out of that, that in the recent history of this region, rebels aiming at overthrowing the Kinshasa regime came from Eastern Congo and was supported by the neighboring countries on one hand. And then Rwanda has a security concern because some of the rebels against Kigali are also based in Congo. Then Uganda has concerns, or has had many concerns, because some of the rebels fighting the Uganda government have also been based in Congo. So these two countries also have concerns. So we are not very sure whenever there is a rebel there who is supporting it and for what reasons, because they have got those security concerns and they have had rebels supported from one country or one region to the other. And they have just been careful about it. Uganda is very careful because it can have rebels organizing in Congo. But Congo is also careful that there can be rebels organizing in Eastern Congo supported by Uganda or Rwanda, because it has happened in the past. And when the Ugandans and the Ugandan troops and Rwanda's troops were in Congo, they tended to be partisan, unfortunately. Because I remember, even when there was a conflict between the Lendo and Hema, I think by then the late Kazini was there, commanding, he said to have supported, I think, the Hema. And then Congo decided also to have the Mai Mai support them, and the former troops from Rwanda, the Teraba, whatever, somehow I think the Congolese regimes were supporting them because they also knew that there were rebels, I think also in Congo, Congolese, who were supported from Rwanda. Now, you can see this is very complex and it needs serious disentanglement, because on the surface, people might be appearing to be concerned, but when they are pursuing other strategies, because the heads of state are not actually very truthful in what they say when they meet. I wish they could be open, like there is Chogam now, I'm told, there is a time when the heads of state of Chogam go and meet, there is no media, there are no reporters, there is nobody, they just meet alone. I wish the East African heads of state could also meet alone without the media and be truthful to themselves and declare their self-interest, their conflicts of interest in DRC. Otherwise, there is a problem which they do not want to mention in DRC, as I have just given you that historical analysis. That there have been rebels, they all have concerns. Uganda has concerns, Congo has concerns, Rwanda has concerns about rebels operating from different regions. If I can give the example of this image we are given about supporting M23. I don't know whether we are supporting it or not, but based on history, people could say, the other time in 2013, I think when M23 was defeated, we saw them on TV, the soldiers coming to Uganda and carrying their guns. And I think when they came to Uganda, they were disarmed. And they were kept where? I don't know. Some melted even in Kampala. Others were in Bihanga military barracks in Ibanda. From nowhere, nobody can tell you how they went back to Congo. How? I mean, they were refugees, but on which day were they declared to go back and under what circumstances? Was it UNHCR? Was it an arrangement between Uganda government and Congolese government? They melted back into Congo. We don't know even now when they send their troops, whether those fellows are going again to come to Uganda. In other words, finally, I want to submit that I don't completely agree with the argument that I had, the communique that came from Nairobi. They have only prioritized military strategies to resolve the Congolese question. No, it should be a combination of using force and negotiations. And they would like to see the agenda for negotiations together with the standby force. Otherwise, you can say there the troops the other day when the M23 was defeated, I think Tanzania had contributed forces. They went there. Some actually were killed there. And then the M23 fizzled out. That is 2013. All of a sudden, 10 years later, it flares up. So how can we resolve this challenge of Eastern Congo using non-military strategies? We can use military and non-military, and we need to come on board even non-military strategies. There are non-military factors that lead to the situation of Eastern Congo. Actually, basically, it is non-military factors. They are not military factors. Military factors are secondary. They are non-military factors in terms of citizenship, for example. The citizenship question in Eastern DRC. You see, these M23 are a certain ethnic group, I think. They are ethnic Banyarwanda, but in Congo. And the Congolese are denying them citizenship. And with the military going there, stop that fear of those groups of people who are fighting. They will still have it. Do we know why even M23 is fighting? Are they fighting for citizenship rights? Are they fighting to topple the Kabila, the Congolese government? Are they fighting to negotiate for better positions in the government? Are they fighting to secede from Congo? So why don't we go deep and understand the real factors? The underlying factors are not the military factors. So when you talk about a standby force, how many forces have gone to Congo? Those Congolese, we can even keep quiet. You are there, we cannot maintain the troops there because we are poor in East Africa. The day you withdraw, these people will come up again. So why don't we even involve civil society? They can involve some of us and we go and study the situation that is the root cause or origin or source of that challenge. But to do that, conflict of interest must be declared. Do we know the interests of Uganda, of Congo, and of Rwandan leaders? Do we know them? The other day, President Museveni was forthright when they challenged him that Kigali was spying on Uganda. He said, they are spying on what? My secrets are in my head. So the secret, he said it. My secrets are in my head. How will you find them? So can they be very clear about what interests they have in Congo?
Yeah, interesting. I want to bring on Joe.
Before Joseph comes in, because I think
been provoked to say something.
Yes. One.
And that's my duty to provoke.
Yes.
So that we leave those things from the head to the table.
And you know, he's our professor, and I regard him very highly. But if you, and this is why for me, I never take security for granted. I never say security is a matter of the Ugandan armed forces. We must all be keen, must ensure that we maintain an environment that doesn't inflame the situation. If you go to Congo today, you'll find countless militia groups. There is one called Codeco that is now ethnic based, and fighting an
Nearly all of
ethnic
them-
group.
Nearly all of them are ethnic.
Now, if while we used to fly from here through Burasi to Nyankundi, you cannot move anymore. The route between Bunya to the lake, so that then you come through Toroko, you can no longer move. So very soon we'll find people from Bunya running to Uganda. The question is, why do Africans continue to believe that they are their own enemies, which they are not? These ethnic groups in Congo predate their existence, predate colonial borders. For example, it is very difficult to find somebody from Masisi or Ruchuru saying he's Rwandan. They know they are Congolese. Same with the Hema in Bunya. They know that they are Hema, they are Congolese from Bunya. And which is why the responsibility lies onto us, the elite, to study these issues, and therefore, when we are holding discussions, offer solutions that do not inflame the situation. Now, coming to M23, I had the opportunity back then to attend some meetings, and Uganda chaired the International Conference for the Great Lakes region. And M23 was urged to cease fighting. I mean, Uganda hosted them here as long as they are not engaged in anything wrong in the country, hostile, but also to give the Congolese government and the other processes an opportunity to handle those issues.
Did they express grievances at the time? What were the grievances?
Yes, they did. They actually said that they wished to, and I'm not their spokesperson, that they wished to be integrated in the forces back then. So Uganda hosts them as those processes are being handled. But Uganda has no prisons and barricades, high walls to stop these people from escaping or going back to D.R Congo. So, but even now, currently, you do not see the Congolese government accusing Uganda of anything, because Uganda is in Congo as a state actor. We are not party to the conflict. We are not one of the warring parties. The issue is the illegal armed groups, including ADF, Codeco, and others that attempt to take power by unconstitutional means, that now actually bilaterally, Uganda and D.R Congo under the Operation Shuja joint operation are fighting ADF, and they were very welcomed by the population. So just like Professor has said that this issue is complex, but also the heads of state also called on the warring factions in Congo to commit themselves to political processes. So it is not one solution, a military one, or the East African standby force that is going to be deployed, but also creation of an environment for people to talk, to be listened to, for grievances to be aired out in a safe space.
Interesting, Sarah. Maybe Joseph, you've given Sarah a bit of your time,
Yeah,
which is
fair
okay
enough.
for a regular panelist. That was good. But as we are almost tending to breaking off, maybe Sarah's pointed out an issue where I say that possibly we need to not to treat ourselves as enemies, fellow enemies. You know, like Africans. I would want to believe that at some point a conclave meeting like that one, maybe a pronouncement to say that since we are East African community, the borders are open, and we stop calling these Congolese flocking into here refugees. We call them internally displaced people, so that we know that we are dealing with our fellow nationals, or possibly our fellow people, East Africans, we call ourselves in that way, so that maybe possibly that would help issues. But
can I put something along what you are saying?
yes,
Because I have heard it from many people, and to me, I think it is a misconception. That because people have been together in the past, or they share a lot in culture.
there have been intermarriages.
There have been intermarriages, and therefore they cannot conflict. I have said it before. If you want, even in most cases, if you want to have fire in your home, you marry even twins who came from the same womb, and you have polygamy and you marry those twins, they will fight each other. But forget about twins, you marry sisters, and you will see. The point I'm making, having the same people, having come from the same family, whether ethnically or lineage or clan or region, does not preclude those people conflicting.
Interesting.
From the biblical story of Cain and Abel, it doesn't matter whether you are from the same father and mother, you can also fight. Therefore, let's not wish conflicts away and say because we are the same people, therefore we can't fight. We can fight, or we might have peace.
Great, that's understood. We know that conflicts will happen, but also we know that
we can resolve them.
We have a way of playing around, including
Sure.
that if you married sisters, we know people who do that and have their sisters really live in these homes. And
they normally quarrel.
Yeah, depending on how you handle the situation and go about it. But I wanted to invite in Joseph. This issue of I think there was a mistake by the president Tshisekedi to invite Burundi and Uganda and leave out Rwanda in this whole invitation to ADF, because Rwanda has in a way, the Kagame said possibly he would also want to involve himself in the eastern to
resolve the conflict.
Yes, to fight them.
No,
because he felt there was a way. You know?
No, I get your point.
Yes.
No, sovereignty has got its own discretion. The Congolese president, mandated, has got a right to pick and choose whom he seeks support from. Strategically, it will be neither here nor there. Quite clearly, it's the case that he's convinced beyond reasonable doubt that Rwanda has got very specific, active interests in D.R Congo. And to that, you can't really sort of hold him back on it. So he was justifiable in picking whoever he did. In this case, he picked Uganda. Maybe it could even be strategically that I think, as Professor is alluding, that by inviting Uganda to the extent that what Sarah says, you go and then you get a glamorous top star guest who does not necessarily mean that these guys don't have underlying issues. And Sarah can tell you clearly on camera, the Congolese people have got big issues with us, Uganda. They can say officially that I have been one of the Ugandan diplomats on behalf of the people of Uganda and the people of this region to try and calm down Congolese in terms of our attitude based on what historical record has been in Congo. And I'm actually delighted that, yes, an element of Congolese officials, including the government today, can meet Uganda business delegation, some of whom they will know are very much close or linked to Mr. Museveni, and they play it calm. So that means that it is possible for us actually to calm down our conflict. So outside detail. That said, though, a point that Sarah made, once you get all this officialdom thing and people came to protest, I know you're also being very diplomatic there. There's actually a possibility that Uganda-Rwanda conflict, that Rwanda and Rwanda intelligence could easily, it's a big head-breaking news, could easily have actually influenced the inflaming of an anti-Uganda thing, because that happens in conflict, and Rwanda is absolutely capable of doing that. Or perhaps an opposing interest amongst Ugandans to be able to do so, certainly it's not from UPC, meaning Uganda People's Congress, to do so in that way. But that said, it is also still possible that the mainly genuine Congolese who had a very specific view about some of the things that Professor is saying from a historical perspective. And final point, don't forget that Congo is actually politically substantially divided. Tshisekedi is basically a holding leader for Congo, leading really to the time when he became president. So Congo is quite still divided themselves. And that is why we're appealing this going forward, that Congo needs a political settlement. And the big political settlement in Congo is one in which perhaps there's a national conference in Congo. Perhaps that national conference includes a possibility of putting on the table a program for a devolved government, a much more coherent devolved government in Congo. I'm a believer in a big government. In fact, I'm a Republican, so I don't necessarily believe in this organized breaking of our republics like these small districts. But by and large in Congo, considering the state where it is at the moment, that might be an active consideration. But that is not going to come out from these guys in Nairobi. The guys in Nairobi, with the exception of Uhuru Kenyatta, in a way, all of them have got specific interests. And those interests are both political, military, but in particular, economic. And Sarah, I'll save you on this one. Their economic interests, which include the reasons for building the roads in Congo. And some of the building of the roads in Congo, Rwanda is not idle. Rwanda is watching. And to the extent that actually Uhuru Kenyatta wants a quick stabilized Congo, maybe that is partly good East African, but I'm sure Kenya and Kenyans, maybe even Uhuru Kenyatta, long term, maybe people who have economic interest in Congo. The sad thing, though, is this, that Congo, the richest country on the continent, and the country that, when it hits middle income status, we know that there'll be guarantee for spread of middle income status on the African continent, should continue to suffer like this, really because of its resources. The resources which are being picked by formal interests within the region, picked by informal interests in the region, and picked by informal interests beyond the continent. That really is the issue. How do we, African leaders, African politicians, in my opinion, beyond the sub-region, come together, coalesce at an equivalent of African Union level to say that, look, comrades, brethren, sisters, how do we deal with and how do we help Congo beyond whatever is being played down there? That would require, the other day I saw my elder Tambubeke at 80, seems to be struggling. I was quite shocked actually, his physique. We need a big African to come up and help these guys, including the Museveni, say, comrades, you guys have done a little bit well, but we were coming to be with you guys to try and make sure that we solve Congo. Congo's biggest problem is political leadership. Congo's biggest problem is consensus within the region. Congo's biggest problem is those within the neighborhood that Professor is saying, people who actually have interest in Congo to also be put to debate. And linked to that is the economy.
And the global forces.
Military and the global course. The military is basically a symptoms of this. I think the sooner we do this, the better.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joseph. And of course, let's get to a short break. To you, our viewers out there, kindly follow this conversation. Is happening live on our YouTube channel, Civic Space TV. We're on Twitter, Chat Show UG hashtag, but also on Civic Space TV hashtag. And Facebook, we're also there. Instagram, we have our clips that are run on there. Please be part of this conversation. We are still discussing the Congo question and how best we could possibly resolve the tensions around the region. The short break is coming, and from here, let's return.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Welcome back from that short break, and the conversation was deep and highly heated on the issues around Congo. Kindly follow this conversation. We are on our handle, Civic Space TV YouTube. Place in your comments there in the chat box. Be part of the conversation. And I'm happy and I'm pleased to have been joined by Professor Ndebesa, Sarah Kagingo, and Joseph Ochieno, our regular panelist, onto this conversation. But and right into from the break, I need to bring in Prof. Don't you think that there is need for probably President Tshisekedi to develop a comprehensive plan to possibly negotiate with these armed groups in Congo, and we see to it that we allow Congo first handle this internally before we invite in foreign military operations.
That is necessary, but your presumption is that there has not been negotiations. Actually, M23 comes from those negotiations. I think the term M23, March 23rd, they had come up with an agreement, which they signed. I think it was Nairobi Agreement, and they claim it was broken. That's where the name M23 comes, because that agreement had been signed on March 23rd.
But they say comprehensive.
No, but that was comprehensive, yes. And they talked. So talking should continue, but it should now be regional. On one hand, for example, I know President Kagame doesn't want to talk to, is it FD, Forces for Democratic Republic of Rwanda or something, which is there. For him, he doesn't want to talk.
Yes.
But I think the Kinshasa regimes have always wanted to talk to these rebels, and they should intensify that one, because talking should be done simultaneously with maybe the military strategy. The military strategy is for short term. The long term is talking. But what are you talking? You must be very clear about what you are talking. And the talking should not be limited to Congo, because the problems are transnational. The issues are transnational. Why is there that challenge in Eastern Congo and not elsewhere as of now? In the past, yes, we have had elsewhere in Congo. There is also some fissures in Lubumbashi, Katanga area. But these ones have been more consistent and persistent. And we are told there are very many rebels. By the way, let me make a correction here. Some of those people we call militias in Eastern Congo, and we define them as negative forces. They are not negative, some of them. They are militias who are, in the absence of the state, you must have self-protection. And so people have community protection forces. Yeah? Those are what we are.
There's need to have control.
Now, who will control them? The control should come from Kinshasa administration, but Kinshasa is absent. So when it is absent, communities have to defend themselves. That's natural. So let's not label everybody negative. And in any case, who defines negative forces? Because we have to be careful about that term. Because if you define somebody as negative, then you can interfere with dialogue. Because how do I dialogue with you when you have already defined me as negative and useless? Useless and negative. So we have to be careful with the language we use also about labeling people negative or whatever. But even that definition is not very clear. When you go to Nairobi as heads of state and you don't declare your conflict of interest, and you get a general communique of negative forces, there could be a head of state or two who does not look at a certain group as negative. But when you are there, because it's in the public, you are in the media, you say negative forces. When you don't consider them as negative forces, possibly you consider them as liberation forces. So we have to be careful about the language we are also using. But I want to repeat myself again, that there are non-military aspects of a conflict. And those are the ones that lead to sustainable peace if they are addressed. I mentioned one, but there are very many. There is a citizenship contestation question in that region, in North Kivu especially, and even South Kivu. The Kivus there, there is a contestation of citizenship, which needs to be squarely addressed, so that you allay fears also of those people who fear that the Congo government, the Congo state, wants to disenfranchise them. By the way, do people know, and those who are listening, do they know that that region did not vote in the last general elections? They did not vote. So they did not feel that they are part and parcel of the Kinshasa administration.
What was the reason given?
The reason there was insecurity, and therefore you could not organize an election when there were people fighting each other. You could not have a voters register. You could not register people. You could not have candidates. You could not have rallies. And therefore, that region was disenfranchised. They did not participate in the elections. So there are very many issues, even historical injustices in that region need to be addressed. Simultaneously, again, for emphasis, I repeat, simultaneously as we address the neighbors. Because the neighbors have interests in that region. And remember, there is trans-ethnic relations between these countries. There are communities who have similar social life and social culture across the borders, and who feel certain social sentiments with their fellows in the other region. I mean, like that Masesa region and is it Rushuri, this North Kivu region. They are ethnic Banyarwanda, both Hutu and Tutsi. They are there in that region. Similar people like you find in Kisoro, similar people you'd find in Ruhengeri, and they like. So we need to disentangle some of these complications, but the Congo government should address the fears of those people that they are going to be disenfranchised. But again, we have to also address historical challenges. And as somebody said, I think it was Dismas Nkuda who pointed out this issue, says somehow there is the power of asking for forgiveness. There is power in it. Somehow Uganda has to address the question of Kisangani. Forget about even here near the border. Kisangani, because it's not near the border. There was that war in Kisangani, I think in the other time, yeah? Where I think people there in Kisangani were angered by the forces that were there, both Uganda and Rwanda. And you can go there and mend fences, really, because those things happen. After all, Uganda had security concerns there, as much as Congo had security concerns, and we move forward. Therefore, the dialogue you are talking about should not be between the rebels and Tshisekedi, but it should be, on one hand, between the rebels and Kinshasa administration of Tshisekedi, but also between Uganda and Congo, and between Rwanda and Congo, and even Burundi, by the way. There is a question of Burundi, and then the international community. Let them open up. And we all want, as Sarah was pointing out, we all want peace in this region, and we all benefit. We can trade with Congo, Congo can trade with us, we can exchange goods and services, and improve the lives and the livelihoods of the people within this region. But now,
do you think that there was need for such a meeting to have representatives from the militias to come in a meeting like that, if we're actually looking for a lasting solution, peace in the region, to have the M23, probably the leadership to be part of the conclave meeting, or the meeting of the generals, they would have been part of them.
You see, the conclave is just a short term, setting in motion a long term. Yes, all people should be brought on board, and unconditionally. Let's not put conditions for people to be on board. Both the militias and the governments of the region. Because sometimes the governments of the region, the language they have been using, you would hear somebody saying, we are not part and parcel of that problem of Congo. That is their own problem, or Congo is our problem, and we stop at that. No, let us actually agree that there are certain conflict of interest in this region among the leaders within the region, and they need to declare those interests among themselves and say, let's have a new chapter. As far as I'm concerned, the chapter that is there now, the agenda that is there now, whether you take the troops in Eastern Congo without addressing the origins, the source of the challenges, you will not solve that problem. You will solve it temporarily, but it will not be sustainable, because there are certain hidden agendas which have not been disclosed, have not been put on the table, coupled with, of course, the inability of the Congo government, because it is also a poor factor. Really, I mean, why the government of Congo, the state, as far as Eastern Congo is concerned, is a failed state. And in a situation of a failed state, you expect very many things to happen. In my language, they say that when the head of the family is not taking effective control of the family, even frogs will come and start climbing the walls. So the frogs are now climbing wherever they want to climb, because Kinshasa administration is also not effectively administering the region. But the international community should come in. And all this money that they have spent on MONUSCO, if they had spent it on construction of infrastructure, especially the roads, or even a railway line from, say, Rwanda to Kinshasa or Uganda to Kinshasa, that can make the movement of troops very fast and can make the movement of goods and services very fast, we can somehow go a long way to address the problem. The problems of Congo begin with the Belgian rule in that Congo and the mismanagement and misgovernance of Congo from that time. Although Mobutu had brought in some semblance of peace, it was not sustainable peace, because it was not based on principles of good governance in Congo.
Interesting. Sarah, I would want to ask, in the meeting of the heads of state, shouldn't we have seen that in there, President Tshisekedi clearly draws out, probably pulls for drawing out clear rules for the foreign military interventions, operations in Congo. At least he demands for clear operations in Congo.
And he
because-
enforces them
and
with
he
what?
forces them.
How?
No, in that meeting, if they agree to them, then probably they will be followed. But
No,
the communique we didn't see this in the communique.
now, each of our countries has a chief of defense forces. There is a committee of chiefs of defense forces. And while we were in Goma, I actually saw the chiefs of defense forces meeting. They even issued a statement that they were discussing rules of engagement, the concept of operations. And so the heads of state during the recent meeting received that from the chiefs of defense forces, and the CDF of D.R Congo participated in those meetings that informed the decision of the heads of state of the East African community. But you asked earlier, he said, why did that meeting not have some of these groups that are party to the conflict?
Yes.
Now, it is the responsibility of leaders, of these heads of state, to ensure that the region is secure. Defense is their responsibility. Some of these armed groups, for sure, have been a cause of so many problems. So it is all right, while there has been, and President Uhuru Kenyatta is the chairperson, actually one of the co-conveners of the inter-Congolese consultations, where those other armed groups participate, it was important that the heads of state of the East African community give direction to a problem that could easily spill to all these other countries. Now, also, for me, Professor seeks to invite the international community. MONUSCO has been in Congo for ages. This is the UN, and I mean, the Congolese have never had peace. It was Uganda's idea, and that of the D.R Congo, for us to construct roads and infrastructure. Before disruptions, recent 2018 to 2020 relations between Rwanda and Uganda, there was a mechanism, the Northern Corridor Integration Project Summit, that will be pursued for infrastructure, because, like Professor rightly pointed out, infrastructure does not only link peoples or ease trade, but it enables security and defense operations. The other thing is, the biggest territory of Congo is secure, peaceful, stable, and thriving. And so we need to build peace, build relations between our countries, and be careful the wording we use, because I mean, you can't go to Kinshasa and say they are a failed state. I was actually shocked. The ministers are very brilliant. The Congolese will tell you, both the ordinary person, the people in government, they are tired of wars in the East. They would like, you see them opening up industrial parks. They want their people to thrive. They really are invested in peace. But maybe they need help on ensuring that their force is equipped. And Uganda here is very well respected in the region. And the Congolese will tell you, because they have followed Uganda all these years. They have seen, I mean, even now you hear President Museveni saying it is incumbent on the leadership of the East African community to ensure we are keen on strategic security. Imagine if somebody conceives ideas and he once said, suppose anyone said now we are going to occupy a certain part in East Africa, how do we fight back? Also, it is important that we know that no head of state wakes up every day to jeopardize their country. No Ugandan, no Congolese wakes up every day to say they wish to not thrive. Their peoples, our peoples would like to continue to, like now, one of the Congolese recently told us on a group of the business community, he said, for me, I'm not party to the issues while I live in Goma. All I want is to run my little business, be able to thrive, and then in the evening go and dance to Lingara and be happy, and tomorrow my children attend school. So my last on this is to urge all of us, civil society, media, everybody discussing these issues, to be careful how we frame the questions, to be careful what we say, because any small mistake, we may inflame the situation, and this is not good. But for me, I welcome the mechanism of the EAC that does not only speak to the East African standby force, the regional force, but also has categorically called on certain groupings or anybody who calls for violence or genocidal statements to stop. Because you see, Professor has pointed out back then, so many years ago, there were groups, especially in Ituri, where, I mean, you have militia attacking people, and communities decide to say, how do we get help to protect our own people? And these are not necessarily negative people. So as long as we continue to work towards ensuring that our countries coalesce on minimum interests, which is thriving of our people, strategic security, I mean, growing our economies, I think the future is okay in the region. And as a Ugandan and as an East African, I call upon all those warring factions to please cease the fire.
In those factions, do you include the heads of state in the region? Because they are also responsible.
I'll speak
I'm not
for
saying
Uganda.
they are the only ones.
Demiano Professor has asked me. I will speak for Uganda because I live here and I know that Uganda.
You know that what?
I know that Uganda
Uganda's
is
head
in
of state.
Congo as a state actor under the auspices of Operation Shuja, agreed on under a bilateral agreement between Uganda and D.R Congo. We are therefore not party to the conflict, and we cannot be referred to as a warring faction.
But history does not support you.
Joseph, I want your take on this.
No, Uganda is a party, and Uganda is a party, and then Sarah is right to take.
And Uganda has concerns.
To have the
Anyway, they are rebels.
That she does.
And it's because of ADF that we are in Congo to jointly with the FARDC, the army of Congo, to eliminate the ADF.
When we went there to remove, when we went to remove Mobutu, was there ADF in Congo?
You see, Professor, our history is very interesting. We have a history in the region, and I was a young child growing up. I know about liberation movements. I know that the freedom struggle in Uganda inspired other people to struggle for freedom. I know that at that time,
during 1965, Uganda government under Milton Obote was also said to support the Murera insurgents in Congo. Actually, Congo was forced to bomb Uganda around that time, and the government of Uganda nearly failed on allegations that the Uganda government was selling gold and taking money on behalf of the Murera group in Congo that was fighting Kinshasa. That's not today.
And at the time, it was absolutely sensible because the Ugandan government of the time was supporting an Africanist organization, which was Lumumba's organization, and Visual Movement Organization, if it had succeeded, would not have the mess in Congo. In fact, it was failure of that has created the continuation of the mess in which we have in Congo. And that is why, Sarah, we need political leadership on these matters. And Mr. Museveni is possibly the person in the whole region who has the capacity to disinterest himself economically. I hope he does not have an economic interest beyond the coffers of Uganda. And I'm saying it very deliberately on camera. We are on record, it's too recent to be dismissed, that we went to Congo not only to push Mobutu, but after pushing Mobutu, to push Kabila, which was a very strategic interest to individuals and which caused huge millions of deaths in Congo. And that scar
millions? Maybe not millions.
That scar is there. You know, the continuation of it, because that's officially how it's presented, that we set the fire amongst Congolese, some of the almost genocidal conflict amongst themselves. Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, Congo themselves into identity questions, including the other Congo. So the conflict continued there for a very long time. So we have responsibility, and of course, the Congolese went to the UN. We were accused of plundering. These are very real, practical things, and we can't have a conversation like this without making reference to those. When we make reference to those, we are not necessarily inflaming anything, nor are we apportioning blame. We are saying that as Ugandans, particularly at this high level partner, now I appreciate your trip to Congo. What are we trying to do as ourselves, honestly, in such a manner that we can make a net contribution to the peaceful settlement in the country? Back to this again, the matters in Congo are not security, they're not security, they're political. And in fact, my concerns though is that when we single out M23 and one or two security organizations in Congo, and we give an element of panacea conflict resolution mechanism because it's in Congo, as if we would apply the same theory if it was in Uganda. We've had cases where guys in ADF, we respond to ADF differently. We respond to COIN differently. These are Ugandan citizens, and they've got conflicts in Uganda. And what about if it's Congo? I'm not saying that therefore we should actually apply the same on these guys. We're saying we just need to be open as Africans to make fair observations long term. Congo is the most conflict, and the professor is quite right, taking us back to the 60s. I believe that one of the reasons why the mess continued, I made the submission earlier, is because there is no clear political leadership in Congo. There isn't sufficient consensus in Kinshasa. Yet Sarah is absolutely right. And it's a rare point is made that actually when we talk about Congo, we think about this tiny little mess around Kisenyi. This is a powerful, sophisticated African nation doing rather generally very well. Just happen to be rather large. And the other end of it, which is like a mini granary, is where interest from Uganda, Rwanda, and others are pulling their mineral wealth, which actually is very much of a big shame to all of us, especially those people who are involved in this. I still come back. How do East African community leaders meet and they don't ask what happened to the M23 rebels who came into Uganda? What happened to the arms that were taken away from them? Were they handed back to the Congolese government, or were they neutralized? Now, the other thing, to be fair, it may not necessarily be that those ones who are in Uganda are the ones who went back to Congo. If it is the case, actually, they've got a political grievance in Congo. These things, and I tell people like Mr. Museveni, we should always resolve political issues politically, because Ochieno can be pushed to the other end of the road. I can tell you, some others will keep emerging. So younger Congolese, when there are grievances in Congo, they will always emerge. What are the issues around M23? Sarah, there are nuances around identities about these guys, that these guys are ethnic,
and citizenship.
And the question of citizenship. Is it genuinely that? Or there are there fronts for Uganda and Rwanda and ethnic others who are outside their boundaries using ethnic them in there? Number one. Number two, is it genuinely true that, which may also be the possibility that they're actually being marginalized in Congo? In which case we put it on the table and say, Congolese authorities, what are you doing? And is there evidence? Now, but from the point of view of experience in history, if you look at the composition in terms of identities with these guys, the constitution about the warring factions really constitute about 10 or so percent, at most 12, 12% of the Congolese identities. The other majority identities are generally rather quiet. But unfortunately, the conflict is affecting the entirety of the country. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we should actually push for a national conference in Congo. And finally, yes, the MONUSCO thing, I have been very critical about it. I was critical about it, MONUSCO, over 15 years ago, by the way, as I was in the case of South Sudan. The UN in our names, money which are being pushed, when in Congo, actually, around at the peak of some of this MONUSCO thing, forget about even the fact that actually women and children were raped in Congo by many of these UN agencies. I'm just putting aside, that's how much Congo has suffered. And underlying there, you realize that the armies, the soldiers that were doing that, were covering up for some of the interested parties in that place, where there was a UN view that you want to cover up the key leaders who were involved in many of these. So Congolese have had many of these issues. The answer is political. The answer is political in Congo. They're unlikely to do it themselves. We need to be able to help. They are unlikely to be able to be helped by us alone. It needs to go beyond East Africa region. Sarah is concerned about the internationalized, beyond the African element. Where is African Union? Where are other African leaders, even if it was a framework, which is not necessarily African Union? Where are other leaders in Africa who don't have direct interests, like Uganda, Rwanda, Sudan, and indeed Kenya? And finally, one of the reasons why Tanzania was not involved, Sarah, is because Tanzania knows that the deal around this is economical. And as I said, some of these are things we can't say possibly on air to inflame what we're trying to say. But it's true that this battle, one of the reasons...
The President Suluhu Samia was represented at the conclave by the ambassador of Tanzania. The chief of defense, the CDF of Tanzania, was in a meeting in Goma and participated in the recent
That's correct,
one.
yes.
So this is truly an EAC mechanism.
All I'm saying is that Tanzania, even Tanzania, has its own reservations and grievances. The attendance and not attendance of the heads of state notwithstanding.
Tanzania is quite inward-looking. They would not want.
Well, are you people historical? Actually, when M23 in 2013 was fought from there, and they came to Uganda, they were dislodged by the TPDF, Tanzania People's Defense Force.
Yes.
When it offered its troops, I think, to MONUSCO or something like that. So Tanzania, by the way, Tanzania also borders the Congo,
that's right.
in a certain way. It is maybe Chikwete had a certain direction of interest, but now I don't know the current president, what geopolitical interest she has. You see, as we talk, the issue, the Congolese crisis needs a geopolitical strategy, not only a Congo strategy, because it is cross-border issues that are partly contributing to the crisis in Congo. Of course, the issue of governance is first and foremost a Congolese affair. But there are non-governance issues that are affecting Eastern Congo. And therefore, we need a geopolitical strategy, and not necessarily a military. I see that the Nairobi conclave, whatever they mean by conclave, it's a new term that I am seeing on the scene. Whatever they mean by that, it should have addressed the geopolitical strategic issues that should include the interests of the geopolitical leaders within the region. You see, immediately from the communique I see, they saw the problem as being militia, first and foremost.
But Professor, the communique is very clear. They have called on all those armed groups to immediately cease hostilities. Actually, the statement was everybody to withdraw from positions they had taken. 2, discouraged language of violence, calling for genocide. 3, called on everybody that is party to the conflict to commit to a political process. I think that's fair enough.
I wanted to add the 5th. That they should have called upon themselves, those leaders, that we call upon ourselves to sit down and resolve the Congo crisis because we are part of the problem.
But we saw
they
them.
Seem to be saying,
they were there.
Saying, no, they were there, but they are saying the problem is these others. They are part of the problem. I'm not saying they are the only problem, but they are part of the problem. And unless
I saw some.
Can I put a researcher? Can
I
I
saw a comment somewhere online that the East African problem has gone to Nairobi to discuss
I
the
don't know
problem.
about that. I didn't see that one.
But let me just make a quick
I didn't
economic
see
one,
that one.
which I was hesitant. The road construction in Congo between Uganda and DRC, I am very critical about it because it's very bad economics. It makes absolute sense. It's very bad economics. For me as a Ugandan citizen who is still waiting for my tarmac road in Tororo, which was due in 1989, and the UPC government is not there. So I'm very concerned about that. But that's neither here nor there. But that road means that if it succeeds, well, it actually serves an element of Ugandan and Congolese strategic interest for trade, whether Sarah is linked to this or not. It's an inconvenience to Rwanda. You know, if you look at the map of Congo and access to resources in Congo, including the coltan stuff which is being done. As I said, but really this is an important observation to be made. So if you're not careful, one of the discomforts for Rwanda is actually the road construction, which from a strategic point of view makes sense for Uganda and in this case to an extent Congo, and so this inconvenience to Rwanda. In the likely event that actually works, Tanzania actually loses if you see the transit of goods that come from the port of Dar es Salaam going into the greater Congo, if Congo is to go ahead and stabilize. If you just think about it from that point of view, Professor, without even the politics, then you can actually see that Tanzania has a reason to be discomforted.
I have another angle.
It's your political politics that...
Mr. Moderator, I have another angle. Contrary to him, for me, it makes a lot of economic sense because it is going to facilitate trade between the two countries.
I do not disagree.
And we are likely to get maybe more revenue out of that trading, and we use that revenue to construct the roads in Nagongera or wherever. However, from a long strategic point of view, this is my theory. I'm just theorizing, and I could be wrong. I'm not stating a fact. We might create a situation where most of the connections between Eastern Congo are with Uganda and Mombasa more than Kinshasa and the Atlantic Ocean. The long-term result of that, Eastern Congo may seek to secede from Congo and come to Uganda or Rwanda.
Demiano,
I am theorizing.
You're theorizing, yeah.
Because if they connect properly and they forget about Kinshasa, why wouldn't they ask now to be part of Uganda and Rwanda and leave the Kinshasa people alone? At a long strategic horizon analysis.
Now that's why we see that there will never be any peace in this region.
I don't know. It can be. It can be.
Peace. I think now the truth is that Kinshasa trades more with European countries because of the location, infrastructure challenges. But now we have Ugandan businessmen that were the pathfinders that beat infrastructure barriers, that take products all the way through Tanzania, Zambia to Kinshasa.
Yeah.
A kilo of any product from here by air to Kinshasa may be charged $1.5. That is a barrier. So these roads to the east, because I mean there must be a start.
I don't, by the way, as a matter of principle, I don't disagree about the obvious economic benefit. I'm just talking about the principle of it. And I'm just talking about the principle of it, really. You know, and on the one hand, but on the other, I'm asking to try and say to you guys something that you're dismissing, that the economics, whatever the object of this road, the road is an inconvenience to Rwanda and Tanzania, and it may be a net contributor in a particular way to the conflict that we're talking about. That's all I was trying to say.
But now, for the case of Uganda, now the current budget is supportive to agro-processing, to value addition. Several businessmen are adding value to products. Very soon we shall have surpluses. So it is not true that we have no economic interest. And I don't think the interest of our leaders should be an individual economic one. That's
Unfortunately, unfortunately it is.
But I'll speak for Uganda. Our interest is that we expand markets so that our products penetrate these markets. Our countries have just ratified the African Free Continental Trade Area, but you see, Congo is not a dumping ground. They too, I saw young people and women who make chocolate in Goma. They too are looking to Uganda as a market. Exactly. So what's wrong with us connecting the people, ensuring that our products get to each other's market by way of building infrastructure?
In analysis, we have what we call contradictory effects or consequences. There is one where we shall trade and facilitate trade, which can translate into the good lives of the people. That one I accept absolutely. But there is the other long-term one where Eastern Congo will now connect more with Uganda and East Africa, the former East Africa, and not with Kinshasa. And therefore, by the way, can somebody help us? What is the distance between the border of Uganda and Kinshasa? It must be like 5,000. I don't know. It may not be. How many kilometers? It is very far. The roads that we are going to construct will not even be 2% of the distance to that area. Therefore, it will facilitate trade in Eastern Congo with Uganda, not necessarily with the other Congo. And of course, when people trade more with East Africa and Uganda, and they start speaking Luganda and whatever, definitely the consequence there is positive for Uganda and Eastern Congo. But it could, at a political strategy horizon, it could attract Eastern Congo to associate more with Uganda and stuff.
I'm surprised you don't like that.
And secede from Kinshasa. That's a contradictory.
Uganda Airlines flying to Kinshasa.
Time will tell, but you know our time is fast spent. I need to.
But we don't want time to tell a wrong story.
Yeah, we need to. I need to invite in Joseph just to give your final parting shots on the way forward for the lasting really peace in our region. I will just come back to the same thing, and in fact to take on Sarah's tone that whatever happens, really, Congo should be helped to resolve its internal conflicts, and it has been a long push. UPC, we put up our hands. We started with this in the 60s. It didn't work. In fact, we were beaten to it by imperialists. Really, Britain and Israel, America beat us to it by bringing in Idi Amin. Had it not happened, we would have been where we are. I think that effort should be continued. It should be continued, unfortunately, at the moment beyond the region. And as I said, African leaders should be merged so that we begin to focus on African issues in our own way. But that is going to be, first of all, a political solution before we actually seek a military solution. In Congo, Congolese need to be able to be helped and facilitated to reconcile as Congolese. East Africans need to be helped to reconcile, meaning all of us Ugandans. I'm quite willing to be a part of a delegation in Kinshasa to go and kneel and ask for forgiveness, that let's forget about these other things, forgive and move together so that we're able to build an Africa region which is first for Africans and second for Africans to trade with others. Thank you very much, Joseph. Prof, your final parting shots?
There are very many factors that are responsible for the insecurity in Congo, and therefore we cannot exhaust them here or even in this conclusion. I will just speak on one, which I think is one of the most important, that we need to address, actually much more than the military question. We need to address the trans-ethnic relations between the communities in Uganda, in Rwanda, in Burundi, and Congo, because that is the elephant in the room. There is an English expression called elephant in the room. An elephant is so big that it is in the room, but people are not seeing it. The elephant in the room is trans-ethnic relationships within this region in Eastern Congo, Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi. And unless it is addressed from its source, we are just tinkering on the seams of the challenge that is within and pretending that the elephant is not in the room. The elephant is there. We have to resolve especially the concerns of those ethnic Banyarwanda in Kivu region. They are concerned about their citizenship, whether they are considered as real Congolese or at some point they may be pushed out. But at the same time, in addressing their concern, they also want to dominate the rest. For example, I don't think that M23, which is operating in that North Kivu, it seems to be composed mainly of ethnic Banyarwanda Tutsi. But there are very many other ethnic groups in that region. Very many. There are Hutu, there are others also who are not those. Maybe 50 of them or so. Why aren't they also involved in the fighting? Because originally they were all in RCD outfit to struggle for the interests of the whole maybe region because they felt marginalized by Kinshasa. But now we have one group which is now representing almost the whole of Eastern Congo. So how can that one be addressed? Let there be a commission of inquiry, as they normally say. There is an international conference on the Great Lakes region, which is an outfit of the UN. Can it take time off and have genuine people to research and come up with the conclusion as to the trans-ethnic relations between these groups and how they are causing tension within the region, and then address it by addressing the concerns of the people, the citizens in that region, simultaneous with addressing the interests of the political leaders in the Great Lakes region. The interests of the great leaders, the interests of the leaders, political leaders, heads of state in the Great Lakes region is part and parcel of the challenges of Eastern Congo. We just go to these conclaves or enclaves, I don't know what you call them, and simply say, let's go and take standby forces. Some of those forces could go there actually and start allying with the militia in Congo, as it has happened before. Has it happened or has it not happened?
It does, just.
What will stop it happening today even? That you send certain troops of a certain country, when they go there, they are the ones actually who are giving intelligence information to the rebels and say, we are coming here, please run to the other side, ambush that group and do the following. If we don't do that simultaneously, we could have our troops actually die in Congo because some of the troops may betray their fellows.
Interesting submissions there by Professor. And finally, Sarah?
Thank you for having us. The future of our region is very bright. I am extremely happy that in my lifetime, the East African community has been connected from the Indian Ocean to the other ocean that borders Kinshasa, that Uganda Airlines is now flying to Kinshasa 5 times a week, that the exploring flights to Lubumbashi and Goma. I'm very, very happy that that we are now talking markets and products, because as a citizen, I'm interested in my thriving and the thriving of my neighbor and all Ugandans, and that D.R Congo is very welcome to East Africa. This presents a very good opportunity for Congolese to sell their products to Uganda and vice versa. On M23 representing the entire Eastern Congo, that's not true. That I mean, Eastern Congo is big all the way from Mahagi.
It is trying to represent Kivu.
But you see, groups like Codeco, which are cutting people in Bunia all the way to Mahagi, do not have a just cause, and they should be eliminated. So for me, I welcome the mechanism by the EAC, but also commend our forces, the UPDF, for being people-centric, for what they have so far done towards elimination of the ADF that has been a problem here. You remember they would come in here, massacre people, run back to Congo. I mean, for me, I would like to go to Congo, meet my friends, trade with them, and I'm very, very happy that the EAC is agreed on the direction, which is strategic security, expansion of markets, building industries and products, because the future is that of innovation, The future of young people is that of products and markets.
And good governance.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah, for those final remarks. But also importantly, thank you very much for our viewers for joining us here every Friday 2 to 4 p.m. Thank you very much once again, Joseph, Sarah, and Professor, for this episode on this Friday on Congo and the whole security situation in the East African region. Until we meet next week, my name is Masesa Demiano. May God bless Uganda.